Today we're going to talk about both commas and modifiers. And by the end of the video, you should be able to define what a modifier is, find them in sentences, and place commas where needed by modifiers in sentences. And first, we're going to learn just what the basics are. What's a modifier, what are misplaced and dangling modifiers, and where do commas go? So first, what is a modifier? Anything that describes, clarifies, or changes a noun, because modify means to change. For example, modifiers can be single words, like adjectives or adverbs. Those both describe something. Adjectives describe nouns and adverbs describe verbs or adjectives, so those would count. Modifiers can be small phrases, just a subject or just a predicate, like prepositional phrases or infinitive phrases. If you need a reminder, prepositional phrases are chunks of words that are started by a preposition and show where or when something happened, like under the sea, over the rainbow, or inside the box. I have a whole separate video just about prepositions and prepositional phrases if you need to understand that further. Infinitive phrases start with a to blank verbal. To go to the store, to watch a new movie, or to catch a cold are all infinitive phrases that include not just the infinitive, but any other words that go with it. And again, you can watch a verbals video if you need more help on that. So modifiers can include phrases, but also clauses, especially dependent ones. And Woobus words are going to be your clue that there's a dependent clause going on, and that a modifier is happening. And finally, there are modifiers called appositives, which can be phrases or clauses, and those happen when you rename or do a context clue for a word, and I'll show you examples of that later. So in general, here are some color-coded examples of modifiers. The yellow car drove quickly down the highway. Which car? The yellow one, adjective. How did it drive? Quickly. Where did it drive? Down the highway. So here's my preposition launching a prepositional phrase. Although it's very important, now here's my Woobus word kicking off a dependent clause. Grammar is hard to learn quickly. You may need to watch this video lesson more than once on your computer. Here's my infinitive phrase, to learn quickly. Which kind of lesson? A video one. How many times? More than once. How? On your computer. So there's a lot of different things that can count as a modifier. A modifier is a pretty big umbrella term. But even though modifiers can seem overwhelming, they pretty much just have one big rule. The only big rule about modifiers is that they need to be in close proximity to the word or words that they're modifying. You don't want to create a misplaced or dangling modifier. A misplaced modifier is one that has been separated too far away from the thing being described. For example, if I want to say that the yellow car drove quickly down the highway, which is that example from a moment ago, I would not want to move the word yellow too far away from the word car. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense. And I wouldn't want to move the word quickly too far away from the word drove, because quickly is saying how fast we drove. So if I said that the car drove down the quickly highway yellow, that's a hot mess. So again, we want to keep modifiers close to the word they're describing. The other bad thing to do with a modifier would be to create a dangling modifier. And that's when a modifier is just kind of hanging there and I can't tell what it's supposed to go with at all. Or it's attached or dangling off the wrong thing. So it would be good to say, while entering the haunted house, I first saw a ghost. Because I'm entering the house and I'm the one seeing a ghost. So this modifier is right next to the word I. That's a good thing. It would be bad if I said, while entering the haunted house, the ghost caught my attention. This might not sound wrong at first, but if you take a look, putting a modifier here next to the word ghost makes it look like the ghost is entering the haunted house, when in fact I'm going in it. So, what our lesson here that we've learned is after a dependent clause, we need to make sure that the subject of the sentence makes sense. After a dependent clause, the next word that follows it should be logical and go with it. Modifiers need to be close to the word they're describing. So you might be thinking to yourself, wait, what do modifiers have to do with commas? This video is supposed to be about commas and modifiers. Well, certain types of modifiers need commas, especially if there's a lot of them or if the modifier is long. Modifiers might also impact what sentence type it is and require a comma that way. For example, we want to put commas after an introductory phrase or clause. On Saturday, comma, we will sleep in late. Here's my introductory phrase that needs a pause. I also need a comma if I'm interrupting a sentence with a phrase or clause. LeBron James, the team captain, scored the most points in that game. Here, I am using an appositive phrase, the team captain, to interrupt and clarify or rename who LeBron James is. So here's a special type of interrupter called an appositive that is using a context clue to clarify who LeBron is, in case we didn't know. You can also put phrases at the end of a sentence, and that would get a comma too. Walter passed down the watch to his son, Adam. So I'm using a context clue to clarify who the son is. If you've watched my sentence types video, you know that it's optional to put a comma with a dependent clause at the end of a sentence. So I will go to the mall since you asked me so nicely. This comma is technically optional, and we can go over that more if you need it. Now, modifiers can also impact commas in lists. For example, if you've got only 2 adjectives and you want them in a certain order, you don't have to put a comma. This sentence right here is correct. The old DVD player was broken. Now, technically, old and DVD are both adjectives right now. Because which type of player? The DVD player. Which DVD player? The old one. Not only are these both adjectives or modifiers, but I want them in this order. It would make less sense to say, the DVD old player was broken. That's less clear and more awkward. So therefore, I want them in this order, and these are now called cumulative adjectives. So I don't put a comma here. The opposite of a cumulative adjective is a coordinate adjective. This is when we have 2 modifiers, or 2 adjectives again, but they're reversible. The order doesn't matter, it can change. In this case, I want a comma. The comma tells me that the order of these 2 adjectives is negotiable, and they can be flip-flopped. I could say, the cheap old iPhone was broken, or I could say, the old cheap iPhone was broken, and it would still make sense. That makes them coordinate. Finally, I definitely want commas with modifiers if I've got a list of 3 or more things. The cheap, old, outdated iPhone was broken. Or I could say the cheap, old, and outdated iPhone. That would be fine. Now, if you're ready, let's go to level 2 and talk about advanced modifier topics, restrictive and non-restrictive modifiers, and when to say who, that, and which. This will sound confusing at first, but hang in there with me. There's a type of modifier called a restrictive element. Restrictive elements are modifiers that are necessary to the sentence. I want to keep them for clarity purposes. These important necessary modifiers do not get commas. And we might recognize a restrictive element because it may use the words that or who. For example, I met the man who walked on the moon. this modifier right here in orange is important to the sentence. It's necessary because which man? The one who walked on the moon. That makes a big difference about which person I talked to. And since this chunk of words is necessary, I'm not going to put a comma here. It's a restrictive necessary element. Same thing in number 2. We went to the theater that had 3D screens. Which one? The one with 3D. That's actually helpful because I don't want to go to the wrong theater. The ninjas who have black belts are allowed to complete a special obstacle course. That could be important or necessary because maybe there are ninjas without black belts and they don't get to complete the obstacle course. So these are restrictive, ones that are necessary. The opposite is obviously non-restrictive. These are modifiers that are optional to the meaning of the sentence and could be cut if I feel like it. These do get commas, and I would use the words which or who instead of that. So the man, comma, who walked on the moon, comma, spoke at the rec center. Well, I can say that the man spoke at the rec center. Maybe the walked on the moon thing is irrelevant. Maybe he didn't talk about the moon or space, and so I don't really care if he walked on the moon or not. So this one is more negotiable. The theater, which had 3D screens, sells really expensive tickets. Well, maybe I just care about the price and don't care about if it's 3D or not. So the 3D part might be negotiable here. And finally, the ninjas, comma, who happen to have black belts, comma, do much more than just fight enemies. Again, this could actually be significant or not. In this case, maybe I care more about the fighting enemies thing. Here's some example sentences. Pause the video and see if you can find the modifiers at all, and then see whether or not you can find where the commas belong. If you're ready, go ahead and look at the answers. What kind of statue? The one of Dr. King. Where does it stand? In a park in Glasgow, Scotland. Which is actually true. Which empire? The British one. When did it rule? Once. Which countries? On every continent. I hope you're seeing a pattern here. What kind of poetry? This kind. Where did it sell? At the auction. Now, 4 is different from number 3 because I'm putting the which is extremely large chunk of words as an interrupter in the middle. This is an appositive clause, and I'm setting it off with commas because it's non-restrictive. It's just helpful but not necessary. Same thing with number 5. Helpful but not necessary chunk in the middle that's interrupting. This is a positive clause. And when does she run? On the weekends. Okay. My bad, I forgot to highlight number 6, but it should say our favorite sport, which is which one our favorite. And what do we play? Indoor soccer. So here's a non-dangling modifier hanging from the tree branches. The monkey made us laugh. The Ohio State Buckeyes won. What did they win? Which game? The college football national championship. Which bike? The Twisted Rusty one. And I could reverse the order of these, so I'm going to go ahead and put a comma here between the coordinate adjectives. How broken? Beyond broken. Which shoes? Ones that are brown or white or black. They're valuable, that's an adjective. Who are they valuable to? Students whose schools have uniforms. So I know we covered a lot in a short amount of time. I will completely understand if you'd like to rewatch the video, and make sure that you talk to someone if you need further help understanding these topics. Thank you very much for watching.